Great. Hi, and welcome to another Fireside Chat. My name is Jonathan, one of the council members of Insurtech UK and co-founder of ULife. Today I'm very happy here to be with one of our legal partners, Locke and Nick Dent, who's a partner there. And one of the things I'm actually quite excited to talk to you about is law. Law, regulation, compliance, it's all a lot of big things that we as Insurtech focus on quite a lot. But before we get specifically to what Insurtech should look out for, one of the things that I've always been told and seen quite a lot since growing a business now is that it's all about the people. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to talk to you about, from an employment side and an HR side, what are those legal things that we should be looking out for our people?
Sure. Well, I guess there's a number of aspects to that. There's both looking after them in the workplace and making sure it's a healthy environment, but also making sure that you retain them in the business and that they're productive employees, and also what happens if they leave. So I suppose you need a few bits of basic framework in place, the boring bits, as it were, which is that having a contract which is fit for purpose, has you cast your mind to, well, are we the sort of business who wants and needs to have people on long notice periods, or actually when someone's decided to go, do we just want them to go?
Yes.
Making sure that if they have sort of valuable information about the business, that you have an ability to put them on garden leave during a notice period. You don't have to do that, but have the ability to do it, and potentially to stop them poaching your employees and clients, maybe even not working in the sector for a period.
And is it common to have different notice period and gardening leaves for different type of staff within the business? So is that something you see frequently, or you'd advise, or kind of better just to keep it simple in the beginning?
I think, well, you often see for the more senior people in the business a longer period, either because if they're leaving, there's more to be managed during the lead up to their departure, or sometimes you see it as effectively a way of, if they are being terminated by you, it's a way of giving them a severance package. So sometimes, probably not in your sector, but sometimes you might see senior executives on 6 or even 12 months notice. I suspect 3 months is the most that most Insurtech companies would want to do.
Okay, it's a great place to start, and just to get the contract all sorted. And then when it comes to incentivization, so what's best when it comes to structuring pay and fixed versus flexible and bonuses? And
well, I guess you want to think about, well, what are you trying to achieve by your pay structures? Are you wanting to drive short-term sales? So perhaps for salespeople, some kind of commission structure, or formula-related bonus structure. Are you trying to lock people in for the long term and incentivize them to stay? In which case, perhaps options in the business, which are which you can liquidate on some kind of vesting event, and then different businesses will want to have a very different balance between the fixed pay, which is obviously a fixed overhead for the business, which you have to pay however well the business goes, and the variable pay, which is flexible up and down depending on the success of the business. So traditionally, most startups will have lower fixed pay and more variable pay, because you just don't know how it's going to go necessarily.
So one of the things I know that we've seen quite a bit, and I know from a tax perspective can be fun, is when you have contractors. And contractors versus employees, how you classify. Just what are your thoughts on that?
There's probably a place for some contractors in the business. And there are some people whose skills are only at the moment accessible, perhaps through using them as contractors, because that's all they're willing to do. But it does usually work out more expensive because they demand a higher rate of pay, and also some of the tax advantages traditionally of being a contractor may be being diluted by the changes to what's called IR35 coming in shortly, where the client will have to certify whether they think they're a disguised employee or a true independent contractor.
And what are the IP issues that we need to look out for if we are hiring contractors?
Well, presuming that you're using them for development work, then it absolutely must be the case that the IP that they create and develop belongs to you, because otherwise what are you paying them for? And that probably means you have to have your own standard terms for contractors. Some contractors come and present you with their standard terms, but maybe you can use them, but probably the first thing you would look at there is the IP provisions.
Fine. Okay, so that's kind of a big key from a legal perspective, making sure that that's there. What do we have to look out for if we're an owner-managed business?
Yeah, well, I guess you hear about fantastically good things and occasionally, dare I say it, fantastically bad things about owner-managed businesses. What you have probably is a pretty entrepreneurial person, or persons who have set up the business. While there are relatively few employees, that enables you to be very flexible, very nimble on your feet, sort of short lines of decision making. And that all sounds great. However, what you also have is someone who is a very driven entrepreneur, who isn't necessarily the best people manager, doesn't necessarily think that's the most important thing. And so you do hear of some quite unhappy ships as, with one or two very dominant individuals who just don't care about the people management side of things. So it's an issue to guard against, and perhaps some people to restrain some of their particular tendencies.
And staying with managers, when we are starting these things and getting growing, there's often just so many unknowns. So how can we educate managers, directors, partners within our firms to actually learn about these issues that are so important?
When you say issues, you mean?
Or I mean, what are the key issues that as managers we should know as growing our business?
Well, I think that obviously in a young business you're going to have people. Some of the people will be great hires. Some of the people perhaps you'll make a full start with someone and they're just not right for the business. So you have to have managers who are not only good at the hard business side of things, but also good at developing people, managing their performance, both in a positive way, and if necessary, if they're not up to the role, giving them some hard feedback, making sure that managers actually have an awareness of how you deliver feedback, because there are definitely right and wrong ways of doing that. And probably some active training is needed for that. I think also you'll see in a standard contract you will have a probationary clause, and where as I say you've made a hire which just wasn't the right hire, the probationary review is the best and right point to deal with that, because most people know that is a decision point. And if they're let go in a probationary period, they will accept that that's the reason, and they will shrug their shoulders and move on to the next thing.
So I mean, one of the things that we've certainly learnt is when we're hiring people in the beginning, it's quite hard to quantify or exactly qualify what a full job description is. We're getting better at it, but specifically with the probationary period, how important is it to set proper expectations up front that you can actually then measure at the end of that probationary period?
I think it's amazing how often you hear of people who start in a job and their manager's really busy and they hardly have a one-to-one with them in the first few weeks. And obviously that's not a good thing. So, yes, a formal job spec is ideal. Does it always happen in any business? No, it doesn't. But at the very least, sitting down on the very first few days as a manager with someone you've hired and saying, listen, this is what we're doing, this is what you need to get good at quite quickly, this is how I like to work, this is how we should interact with each other. I think setting down the ground rules early on is only right and fair, really, and you're going to get the best out of people if you do that initially.
All right. And when you're hiring, what are key things to look out for in terms of the people that you're looking to either hire internally or externally or promote internally when you're trying to fill new roles?
I suppose one thing that there is a great temptation to do as a manager is hire someone like you.
Well, obviously I'm great. I want lots of people just like me.
I think it's a management truism, but I think also true that diversity of background goes to diversity of thought. And if you just pick people who are like you, you're only going to get your own echo chamber back at you. And so, it's probably the right thing to do. It's the lawful and legal thing to do, but also it's good for the business to have, a diverse selection pool that you're picking from, both when you're hiring and when you're thinking about who you're going to promote, who you're going to mentor and support as the leaders of the future.
Yes. Yeah. And then how does that reflect in compensation?
Well, that's a moot point. Maybe it doesn't. But, I always think that if you appointed someone as a manager, then, a key part of their role is how they manage the people who report to them. Yes. Yeah, of course, sales and business performance and financials are super important. Yes. But if that's all you look at, then you're not just driving good behaviour in your managers. Because inevitably, and this is not meant as a criticism, people think that the things that they get paid for are the things that the business value as important. So you need to recognise good people management in your remuneration structure.
So how can you get feedback on that? How do you measure someone's management ability?
Well, it's not easy. I agree. If you are the manager of this people manager, then you need to have some visibility of what they're up to, because how can you be managing them anyway? Yes. You could do either sort of formal or informal 360 feedback. Some companies do that. It has its own complications as well as its benefits. Yes. But some kind of informal feedback about whether the team that they're running is a happy functioning team is, I think, important to take the effort to go and get.
Completely agreed.
Yeah.
When do you need to start formalizing things as we're growing? We focus a lot on just getting the next customer, building the next release, reaching out the next feature. So at what stage do we need to look more internally and say, okay, we actually need proper policies now and procedures and some more rules governing the way we actually operate as a business?
And perhaps a professional HR manager, for example. I would have said, a few years ago, well, when you get to about 40 people, is about the right size to start thinking about professional support, about a sort of more formal suite of policies. Usually people come to me with we need a maternity policy because we've never had someone who's pregnant in the office, but now there is someone, and so we don't have a policy, so what should we have? That's the sort of thing that tends to trigger off these things. But a lot of your type of business is growing so quickly that you may have had 40 as the figure in your head, but you're at 100 before you know it. And so sometimes you're playing catch up a bit. Yes. But there are some important things. Yes. There's sort of rather make-weight procedural stuff that you need to have, but there are important things like a maternity policy, because if you're talking about your workplace culture, that's part of it. Things like a monitoring policy, that is to say, what is your ability if you have a problem and a dispute in the workplace to go in and check people's emails? Yes. Well, with the right policy, then you can do that. But if you don't have anything, then that's going to be a breach of their personal privacy. Probably worth mentioning at this point, GDPR and privacy, data protection generally. Yes. I've said when you get to a certain point in your development, you need to have a more formal suite of policies. Actually, GDPR is something that you need to be on top of from the beginning, and have a good setup in which not only with your customer-facing data protection, but also employee-facing, you're managing a lot of data internally about your employees, and you need to have a proper information notice that you tell employees what you're going to be doing with their data from an early stage. And probably, frankly, as you develop, you need to re-look at these things.
Is that normally included in a employment contract, or is that supplementary? Just I'm personally interested in how that particular policy normally actually works.
I think these days, post GDPR, post 2018, what you should have at the same time as your employment contract, you should have an next to that, what's called an information notice, which is a few pages of documents explaining
Yes.
what you do with everyone's data. And that really should go with the employment contract ideally, but if not, it's given to them.
So can you give examples of some things that will go in that? I mean, obviously we want to process their details so that they can get paid at the end of the month, but are there other kind of lesser known things that we could be caught out for if we don't have an information notice?
Well, I mean, it's also things like, if there's a disciplinary issue or something, we have the right to go in and look at your systems. You get a lot of businesses have all the same policy, so we have a standard information notice, but you usually need to tweak that a bit. So I have a digital advertising client, and what they do is they put out a lot of video clips on the internet, sort of as part of their sort of personal branding of the business, and employees appear in that a lot, and it's a core part of what they do as business, and so you need to address that in the information notice.
Okay, interesting. If you don't have that information notice, I suppose, what is the downside that could happen then when the employee is seeing themselves on your ad on YouTube or whatever it is?
Well, the downside at its worst is that they report you to the Information Commissioner. The Information Commissioner, gets a lot of reports, so won't necessarily look at everything. But where you come unstuck is actually if they get a report, and so they do ask you about your data protection structures generally, and if you haven't done anything and really have stuck your fingers up at the legislation, then they really will mind. So it's normally a little thing which might trigger off a wider investigation from the Information Commissioner, and if you're out of whack generally,
fine. So they'll look at beyond just that particular complaint. They'll actually look at you holistically.
That's the risk. That's the risk. Yeah.
Okay.
If
that
you
doesn't
have a bad
sound
answer to the first question.
Yes. No, thank you. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that I've missed that you think is important for Insurtechs and growing companies to be aware of from people, from the legal perspective?
I think this isn't really a legal point, but I think it's an important one. When you're thinking about all of the things that you should put in place from an employment perspective, actually you need to start off at a more macro level, saying what type of company do we want to be? Do we want to be a company where the employer brand, if you like, is, we're super friendly, super relaxed, and people just love working here? Do we want to be a place where, it's all about the share options, we're driving huge value, and one day there's going to be a huge payoff for everyone? Or what? You need to think about what profile you want to have as an employer, how you want your employees to think about you, and that dictates a lot of what you do thereafter.
Fine. So I think you can actually use a lot of these policies as part of your culture positively, as opposed to just having them because you have to from a legal perspective.
For sure.
Fine. I really like that. Thank you very much, Nick, for joining us. We'd love it if you joined us for more of our Fireside Chats, which are available on the Insurtech UK website. Thank you.